Good Tuesday morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. We got more Seahawks stuff to talk about. Specifically, we got to talk about Shane Waldron. This video is all about Shane Waldron. We're going to dive into him because 12 games down, 5 to go. I figured it was a pretty good time to dive into what he's doing and basically give my thoughts on his performance so far and talk about what he's really here to do because I see the comments from you guys. Some of you guys put a lot of this on Waldron. Some of you guys really don't like him. Some of you guys think he's doing a really bad job. Some of you guys you don't want him here next year. Some people think that he's the problem. Some people think that if Waldron goes and you get another offensive coordinator, the problems will be fixed and the team will be good again next year. And I really don't agree with that. I'm going to say that up front. As far as I'm concerned, the problem started last year when Waldron was not here. So to say that he's to blame when the problem that is happening this year is something that started last year when he was on another coaching staff doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But let's go into why exactly I feel like something like Waldron, if not specifically Shane Waldron, then something akin to what Waldron's trying to do does need to happen. And we're going to talk about why he's here, what the team saw in him, and the way in which Russell Wilson needs to basically alter his game to excel in Waldron's hypothetical offense. Now, before I get into all of that, I want to say one thing here. There's a very good chance that Waldron will be gone next year if Pete's gone, which I want. And I understand that, and I'm cool with that. Waldron hasn't done anything to endear himself to me. Like, he can go, he can stay. I'm pretty indifferent to it right now. But if Carroll goes, Waldron probably goes too, because you usually don't see an offensive coordinator stick around when a head coach leaves. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Does the new head coach comes in and he has to inherit another offensive coordinator? No, that usually doesn't happen. So I understand that. I that's fine. But if you think that Shane Waldron is the genesis of the issues with the offense this year, I think you're missing some context, because later in this video I'm also going to get into his actual performance in terms of how the offense is playing and whether or not the struggles this year can fairly be blamed on him. Okay, so first, before we talk about Waldron, we need to talk about Russell Wilson. We need to talk about how he's played throughout most of his career. We need to understand what Wilson does and what he doesn't do very much. Because there are things that Russell Wilson does more than just about any other quarterback. And there are things that he does less than almost any other quarterback. You will not see very many quarterbacks or football players in general with this stark of a ranking in one area and the exact opposite ranking in another area. So this is from Next Gen Stats. They wrote an article on Russell Wilson doing a deep dive on his numbers when he came back for the Packers game. So it took a look at some of the things that he did over the previous 5 seasons plus the 5 or 4.5 games he had played in 2021. And this isn't surprising if you've watched Seahawks football over the last several years. Deep passing percentage, 16%, 15, 15, 16, 12, which was actually a step down last year. And then so far in 2021, through those first 4.5 games, 15, always in the top 3 outside of 2020. So second, third, second, sixth, second. Outside the numbers. So basically throwing the ball to receivers who are outside the numbers on the field. So not in the middle, the outside. 51%, 47%, 49%, 50%, 45%, 54%. Always in the top 3. Twice he was top 1. So Wilson really likes to do those things. And for the last 5 years of his career before this one, he did them more than almost anybody else. 2020, the number went down a little bit, I think mostly because teams just started playing their safeties back and doing everything they could to take that away from Wilson, and things changed a little bit, but not hugely. Now, what does he not do? Short stuff. 0 to 9 yards from the line of scrimmage in the middle third of the field. This is an area of the field that a lot of quarterbacks attack relentlessly. Not Wilson. He actually throws more deep passes than short middle third passes. One of the very few quarterbacks you could say that about. 15%, 14%, 17, 16. He actually made a step up last year going up to 21 because, again, I think defenses were just taking away the deep stuff from him. 17% through the first 4.5 games of 2021. So he is one of the lowest usages of passes in that range from 2016 to present. I think that's pretty indisputable taking a look at these numbers. These are pretty factual. I don't think they can be debated very much. So that's part one with Wilson. He really likes to throw the ball deep. He really likes to throw the ball outside the numbers. Not a big fan of throwing it short in the middle of the field. And I want to be clear about something. I think that's a Carroll thing more than anything else. Now, Wilson's played under Carroll for a long time. So that style of play has probably seeped into Wilson to a large degree. I understand. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's a coincidence that Wilson's style of play just so happens to be exactly what Carroll wants in terms of not risking turnovers. Because in Carroll's mind, I think he thinks that short over-the-middle passes get picked off more. And whether or not that's still true, I actually don't know. But I think he thinks it's true. So, yeah. So this paints a pretty clear picture of how Wilson plays. Now I want to take a look at another thing here real quick. This is also from Next Gen Stats. Time to throw. So this is a list of the quarterbacks in 2020 by their time to throw. So it's the average number of seconds that passed between a snap and the throw for a quarterback, okay? And for a lot of these quarterbacks, it makes sense. Like if you look at the top 5, most of them make a lot of sense. Jalen Hurts, he's a running quarterback. Of course, he's going to have longer time to throw because he's evading sacks. And he's also a rookie. Rookies hold onto the ball longer than the veterans do most of the time. Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen next. That makes sense too because Cleveland and Buffalo had 2 of the best offensive lines in the league in 2020. Lamar Jackson, pure running quarterback pretty much. Of course, he's going to have massive time to throw because nobody's running around in the backfield better than Lamar Jackson, evading sacks, making people miss, and buying time for himself. And then you have Russell Wilson, 5th, almost 3 seconds. But unlike the other guys in the top 5, the main reason why Wilson has such a long time to throw on average is because that's the way that he likes it, because he likes the deep ball. And it makes sense why. He has one of the best deep balls in NFL history. But he doesn't have an incredible offensive line that makes it easy for him to hold on to the ball for a long time. And he doesn't have, not anymore anyway, the ridiculous sack evasion mobility. Not like he did in 2015, 2016, 2014. It's deteriorated a little bit. And finally, I'm going to be real quick on this one because we've seen enough of this, but air yards. If you look at Wilson from 2018 to 2020, averages about 9 air yards per pass attempt. I've done enough talking about air yards over the past several months for you guys to know what I'm talking about here. So, Russell Wilson throws it deep, throws it outside the numbers, likes to hold onto the ball for a long time, likes to throw for a lot of air yards, not a big fan of short over-the-middle passes. Enter Shane Waldron, who comes from, what? The Sean McVay tree. The Sean McVay tree, we know this because we play against the Rams twice a year. We see the Rams play all the time. But we were talking about this in my Discord a little bit. We were talking about the Waldron stuff. We were talking about the McVay stuff. We talk about this in our streams sometimes. They like to use the middle of the field more. They like to utilize that area of the defense more. They feel like they can make big plays over there. They also like to get the ball out a little bit faster. They do things very differently than the way Wilson had played over the previous 5 years. If you look at the time to throw chart, if you scroll down a bunch, you can find, where is he? Where is that beautiful son of a bitch? Okay, Jared Goff, he's near the middle, 2.76 seconds to throw. And I know it sounds like it's 0.2 seconds. 0.2 seconds really matters when it comes to standing in the pocket, getting rushed by the Aaron Donalds and Von Millers and Khalil Macks of the world, okay? So 2.76 seconds versus Wilson's 2.97 seconds. It doesn't sound big, but it is. It is. The differences between Jalen Hurts at 3.11 and the bottom of the list here, Roethlisberger 2.3, it's not even 9/10 of a second, but that stuff really matters in football. Things happen so quickly. So, coming from that tree, a quarterback who gets the ball out a decent deal faster, and more than that, if you take a look at Jared Goff over his time in LA, his air yards on average per pass attempt were, Wilson's average was 9. Goff never even got up to 9 in the highest air yards per pass attempt year he had, which was 2018, 8.7, 7.7, 6.5. Not a lot of air yards. And finally, one other thing I want to point out here real quick would be yards after the catch per completion. Russell Wilson averages less than 5 yards per completion in yards after the catch. 4.9, 5, 4.8. Goff, over these 3 years, was around 5.7, 5.8. So that's an area where you can see the stylistic differences between the quarterbacks, and you can see the way they're doing things differently in the Rams offense. So, with everything I just said about the way Wilson plays and the way quarterbacks played in the McVay Rams offense, why do you think we hired Shane Waldron? Why did we bring him in if the way that his offenses do things is so different from the way in which Wilson had done things beforehand? Well, you can call it a bad hire because of that if you want to, but here's how I look at it. Over the last couple years, Russell Wilson has started to lose some of the things that made him great, like his athleticism, his escapability, his mobility. He started to lose some of those things that made him so dangerous. You remember the games back in, I remember that game against Detroit in 2015 where he was evading sacks constantly. Every single snap, it seemed like he was making 2 Lions defenders just completely whiff on him. Last year, we didn't see that as much. So he's losing something. And that makes sense. He's getting older, right? Like quarterbacks lose their physical attributes as they get older. That's just part of growing up. That's part of aging. But with those things that Wilson was losing, for him to stay at the top, he needed to gain something. And to me, it seems fairly clear and sensible that we decided that, okay, Wilson can't shy away from these things anymore. Wilson needs to start using the middle of the field. Wilson needs to start throwing short, quick passes. Wilson needs to get the air yards out and start throwing more passes that are going to set your receivers up for yards after the catch. We're going to have to start doing the things that McVay does. And part of that, by the way, would also be pre-snap mastery, which is something that even the biggest Wilson fans in the world have been critical of him on. It doesn't seem like he has a great handle of things pre-snap. That's why historically we've had a lot of delay of games and delay of game close calls and wasted timeouts and general offensive miscommunication because Wilson's pre-snap game was lacking in some areas. So I believe that you bring in a guy like a Shane Waldron to try to address that stuff. And you knew that wasn't going to happen overnight, okay? Like, if you look at the way Wilson is playing so far this year, the air yards are not lower. They're actually, on average, higher than they've been before. Yards after the catch are up a little bit, not appreciably so, but headed in the right direction maybe. And his time to throw is actually way down. So I'm looking at things like this because playing for the middle of the field, targeting things in the middle of the field, that's not optional anymore. It was optional when Wilson was the most elusive quarterback in the league, right? This stuff, you could get away without doing it. But once Wilson becomes a little more unescapable, which is not a word, but whatever, a little more immobile, a little more sackable, if you will, he needs to start doing these other things. It's like if you're a center in basketball and you say, I'm not going to be a good rebounder. Okay, if you want to be a great center, you kind of need to rebound, okay? Or a shortstop who says, I'm going to be good at everything except I'm going to suck at turning double plays. You kind of need to turn double plays if you want to be a great shortstop. So to be a great quarterback, not using the middle of the field and only working outside the numbers, working the deep ball more than any other quarterback, and not checking it down, it becomes a requirement. So that's why you bring in Shane Waldron. Okay? So it takes two to tango here. Yeah, Shane Waldron is having some issues with play calling, which I'll get to in a second here, but Russell Wilson also needs to show a willingness to adapt to this new offense, because once upon a time he was able to run around in the pocket, make three people miss, wait, and make a huge play down the field because he was back there for so long, eventually someone got open. Or make a guy miss and go run down the field for a 20-yard gain. That stuff is getting less and less common. You need to replace it with something. That's why you get Waldron, who, like I just said, kind of antithetical to previous offensive coordinators that Wilson had, and the quarterbacks, the main quarterback that Waldron had worked with, kind of antithetical to the way Wilson plays. Now, that says nothing about the fact that Jared Goff, he's not that good. We know that. We understand that. Wilson's a much better quarterback than Goff, but I'm talking about the way they play. So, to me, when I look at something like that 49ers game a couple days ago, and I see Wilson getting the ball out quick, checking it down, I start to think, okay, we got something here. The results are still not stellar, although they're headed in the right direction, but that to me is the key. The actual production, that's being held up by other things right now, I think. But if Wilson can change his game to be a little more, quickly get the ball out, read the defense pre-snap, then that'll make it much easier for him to maintain a high level of play going forward. That's what we need. And real quick here, because I don't want to spend too much time on this part of it because I don't think it matters that much, but as for Shane Waldron's play calling, because some people really don't like his play calling, they don't like his playbook, I want to bring up a couple things here. Number one, he's a rookie offensive coordinator. He's never called plays before. What did you expect? Him to go out there and immediately be Dick Vermeil? No. Immediately be Mike Martz? It doesn't work like that. Number two, Carroll already told us that most of the playbook, or at least a lot of the playbook, is still the Schottenheimer playbook. So, in some respects, we're not running the full Waldron playbook yet. We're still doing a lot of the stuff that we did under Schottenheimer because we didn't have enough time to completely implement a completely different offense. So, we're still working with some of the old Schottenheimer stuff this year. So, to say everything's going to be perfect this year when you've got Waldron running Schottenheimer stuff, it's not realistic. Number three, if anybody on this team deserves to have some excuses made for them, isn't it Shane Waldron? Who's had 3.5 games of a backup quarterback, 3 games at least of a quarterback who was playing with a finger that didn't work. He's got an offensive line full of guys who have underachieved outside of Gabe Jackson and Brandon Shell. And Brandon Shell hasn't underachieved by virtue of the fact that he's not that good to start. He's had a lot of crap to work through here, so I'm not really into blaming this season on Waldron personally. He hasn't been great, obviously. I mean, look, the points per game stat is what it is. We know we don't have a good offense. That obviously has to come back to him to some extent, but we got to understand that this is a process. You hired an offensive coordinator who had never called plays before, never been an offensive coordinator before. You knew he was young. You knew he was inexperienced. You were hiring him based off the fact that he had been with McVay for a few years. And you also knew you were pitting him with a quarterback who didn't really play the way Waldron's previous quarterbacks had played. So I've seen some things from this union that I like. Like, I go back to that Vikings game where Wilson was getting the ball out quickly. Wilson was making quick reads. Wilson was sharp. He was accurate. He looked like a McVay-style quarterback. The 49ers game that we just played was another good example of that. And then I look at some of these other games, like the Titans game. I think Wilson kind of went back to his old habits. Some of the games right after he came back from the busted finger. So I see some stuff I like, see some stuff I don't like, but that's what I'm trying to get at about the Waldron stuff. It's a process, guys. We may not be able to give it more time because of the nature of what may come this offseason, but I don't think this is a Waldron problem, and that's what I got about this one. See you guys later. Go Hawks.